Hey everyone, welcome to Neighbor Science, the only podcast about clocks and also anime and political economy and
That's true,
stuff.
though.
I'm Ryan Salisbury. We got Chris. Chris is here.
Hey, what's up?
We also got Chloe.
Yo, what up?
That's when you say a thing so that
That's
people know
me.
what you sound like. And we
Yeah,
have
This is the thing I'm saying.
Trewbot.
Me.
Trewbot, who,
Yeah,
as it
true.
turns out, is actually a person and not a bot.
That's not true.
So,
Is there a pun
today we are talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a project by the Chinese state to develop infrastructure around Eurasia and some other places, I guess. Africa, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah. And supposedly it's definitely not neocolonialism. So we're going to find out whether it actually is neocolonialism or not. And just before we start,
Well, it can't be because it's a communist country and communists aren't colonial. So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Problem
imperialism is by definition a stage of capitalism, and since
Right.
China is not capitalist, they can't do imperialism, and also neither were most things throughout history that we called empires.
Imperialism is when America does stuff, and the more stuff America does, the more imperialist it is.
It's
Wait,
true.
China is communist. Laugh track.
Bazinga.
Bazinga.
Fucking.
I am going to find canned laughter to put in there, by the way.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Do you have a definition of neocolonialism to be running off of here, or are we just winging it?
I would say we are closer to winging it than anything else.
Man,
Okay.
this is not a very good ideology, but this is whatever. Let's go for it.
Well, True, you're on hand to help us out with this critical error.
I guess I would say that neocolonialism is using soft power, as in not violence, not direct violence, to force other states to capitulate to your interests.
I just want to say
Right.
it's 4:20 real time now.
Apparently,
And by
in
real
Russian,
time, you mean
it's
Pacific time.
neocolonialism.
Wait, say what?
I would never recognize that in a conversation.
Okay, so anyway, so we're trying to figure out whether the Belt and Road Initiative is neocolonial, and we'll define that as using soft power to force other states to obey the whims of China. I think that's an okay definition to use.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is gonna be very disorganized because I'm on vacation, so I've barely worked on the notes. Mostly been watching Hunter x Hunter and doing stuff in Cape Cod.
Hunter.
Yeah, Hunter x
Well,
Hunter.
that's what we're here for. So we also don't know anything.
We're here to organize it and go, yeah, no, your definition sounds fine, I guess. I don't know, that's good.
Sure.
So basically, what this program involves is the Asian Infrastructure Bank and the Asian Development Bank, which are two Chinese international banks, giving loans to other countries to fund infrastructure development projects that are basically created as like at the behest of China. So they'll say like, we want to build a high-speed rail through this part of the country, and we can give you $1 billion to do it. And it's supposed to be low or no interest loans. But that's kind of exactly what the World Bank does as well.
Right.
So I think we kind of figured it out. It is neocolonialism. That's the end of the episode, guys.
Well, I think what would most significantly indicate if it's neocolonialism or not would be what's put up for collateral on the loans.
Mhm. like
Right.
millions of poor people.
Because like, was it also China that would build like ports in like east coast of Africa? And like, if they
Yep.
couldn't pay off the loan over a certain time, the port was transferred back to China and ownership wise.
Yeah, and there's actually a really good example of that in Sri Lanka. They owed $8 billion on a newly developed port. And as far as I understand, this port was put in a place that's like commercially like not a really strategic location. But it is a strategic location for the Chinese Navy to have a port. And so Sri Lanka was forced to cede a newly developed port to a Chinese company in return for relief on just some of the $8 billion that it owed, not even all of it. And if I remember correctly, because again, these notes are very disorganized, they actually got them to cede part of their land and make it like a sovereign part of China. Like the government of Sri Lanka has like no power there, and and the Chinese Navy.
So that doesn't sound like anything the Dutch or British have ever done.
No, it's nothing like that. Chinese Navy submarines have already gone to that part of the port. And this is 50 acres of land, so it's actually pretty big.
Oh, okay.
And it's held by a Chinese company, not just the government of China. But they let a submarine land there, and if I remember correctly, India like freaked out because they're right next door.
Well, India freaks out whenever China does anything at all, but
yeah, well, wouldn't that be kind of related to what was the other episode you're talking about, like exploratory submarines or whatever? China was allowed to do that, but in general, like they had to stay out of the South China Sea. But through like ownership of ports and whatnot, couldn't they like kind of ease their way in legally without like kind of busting open any treaties? But like if they owned the ports like leading into the South China Sea or around the South China Sea, then they'd have like a legal basis to just kind of say like, well, obviously we have to be allowed here, it's ours. So
Right,
like,
yeah.
India or whomever couldn't really be like, no, you can't be here, or that's like a declaration of war, and they'd be like, we're just in our own backyard, kind of.
Right. Oh, who us? We're just hanging out, having some lemonade.
Chinese people love lemonade, I think. Yeah, so I'm looking at a map, and like it includes like large parts of Africa, which usually when people are talking about the neocolonial aspects, they seem to focus on Africa instead of that like really clear Sri Lanka example, where it's just like, yeah, a Chinese company now owns part of your country.
Right. No, but as long as they're not wearing like pith hats and baggy khaki trousers, then they're all good to go, right?
Oh yeah, that's not colonialism. That's what makes
as long as their money's not green
the clothes, the
or
outfit.
has like a British queen on it or something, then it's all.
Yeah, it's sort of like Kill La Kill. The outfit is what makes it powerful. Nothing? Okay. So let's go by some official statements here from the Asian Development Bank and Asian Infrastructure Bank. So in 2016, the Asian Development Bank said the PRC is interested in supporting the development of 6 economic corridors in coordination with other concerned countries. 1, PRC Mongolia Russian Federation. 2, New Asia European Continental Bridge. 3, PRC Central Asia West Asia. 4, PRC mainland Southeast Asia. 5, PRC Pakistan. And 6, Bangladesh, PRC, India, and Myanmar.
My favorite country is New Asia.
Yeah, that's a good one. And mainland Southeast Asia, that's another pretty sweet spot, I think.
Yeah, European continent. That's a good one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually a European Continental Bridge.
How are they going to
Chris?
develop an Asia-European Continental Bridge if Europe doesn't exist?
Man,
No, you got a point there.
you should really write them a letter about this problem.
Yeah, no, I think they may have made just like an error in the paperwork or something.
Yeah.
Dear China, if it were me, I would simply build all this stuff for free.
Like, is the implication here that it's like generally like how? Oh God, my voice thing just dropped to like red. Okay, is it kind of like how when they propose like train routes, the idea is that we have like two economic zones that we're connecting, and so the entire route along the way would, in theory, increase economically, but I kind of question the say efficacy of that in this situation because like how exactly are they linking this corridor to the quote unquote concerned countries of like Central Asia? You know.
Well,
Yeah, no,
the whole
that's
idea
a good
is to
question.
redevelop the Silk Road, which I'm pretty sure is like I don't know. I guess it's Eurasian. I don't know where it is. Chris probably knows.
Okay, so hi, I'm here. So the Silk Road, we kind of touched on this in like our, I think, Dutch East Indies episodes and some of the other stuff. At Silk Road, there was like, it was really more that there was a network of customary routes that the world, the ancient world, the world of antiquity, and even up through the the Middle Ages, of course, with Marco Polo, but really just a ton of people were using this network of roads and also maritime routes to trade across Eurasia and also into like coastal Africa, Southeast Asia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was because of because this kind of, like I said, customary set of routes had developed over land and over sea to a bunch of different areas of the world that were just for hundreds or thousands of years typical sites of trade, extraction, other kinds of political and economic interest, then it was fairly stable over a long period of time. And it was a kind of like a map within a map, just like, like when you look at the U.S. highway system, but these roads were often developed regionally
to transport news, right?
Everywhere was right, yeah. Yeah. Ancient Rome and ancient China needed a way to meet in the middle with their giant ICBM platforms.
They didn't work too well back then, I don't think.
No, it was very slow going. Mules and stuff, really problematic for that.
They were powered by wood.
Yes, wood-powered mules.
I meant the rockets, but yeah, sure. The mules were powered by wood.
No, those trebuchets actually. Yes,
intercontinental ballistic mule.
So in the sort of Silk Road paradigm, like everywhere was on the way to somewhere, right? And then with the colonial, the shift to the sort of imperial colonial paradigm, and the European kind of capitalist global hegemony, everywhere was on the way to like the imperial core, right? Because it was kind of trying to take as much as possible, and it was centering in this kind of European core, and then in the kind of North American core as well. But anyway,
I didn't know capitalism was that old.
Well, it's in there somewhere. But
so the road was made of silk, though, right?
Right. Yeah. So it was very delicate Silk Road. Very prized. People would cut bits off of the shoulder to take home.
I bet it looked really nice.
Oh yeah. I'm sure it's great. And everywhere, people just added their own style to it. Their
and so China's
style.
proposing a
Patchwork,
21st century maritime Silk Road, which That seems like a real feat of engineering to have like a floating Silk Road. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, lost a lot of worthy seamen.
Seaman.
Hey,
Well, that's just what happens sometimes, I guess.
yeah. So I think that linking it to the kind of current Belt and Road Initiative concept, at the very least, the narrative is kind of seems to be like this kind of idea. Like, look, this was the way before. These were, and I'm
back when everything was good.
Here. Right, exactly. Yeah. This was back when everything was like trade was voluntary and fair and made sense, and so forth. And this is kind of
okay. So they're all ANCAPs, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah. I think all traditional merchants are ANCAPs, like in the ancient world. Which is why everybody fucking hated them.
Viewed states as just clients, if you will.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It seems to be kind of the MO.
A client state is when they're your customer, and the customer is always right.
Yeah. And the dark web is actually just when you're like trading like while at the brothel or something, instead of like at the bazaar.
I think a sort of important thing to know, just the way that we're taught like about the Silk Road, at least in American high schools and whatnot. It's unlike, say, the Northwest Passageway. It doesn't really refer to like a single route. It's just like a network of methods, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a network of like methods, or like sort of tradeways. And
avenues.
Yeah,
I would have called it the Silk Roads.
What's really important. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good way to put it. One of the important things to remember too is that it wasn't just trade. Like everybody, like you mentioned, True, the like textbook American way of thinking about it is kind of reductive, and I think that's another thing that has to be named and highlighted with this, is that it wasn't just about like mercantile trade. It wasn't just about two fucking dudes in turbans giving each other like a bolt of silk for, or like 50 yards of linen for a coat, or whatever you might say, right? But it was also because it was ways, it was means of everywhere was on the way to everywhere, with the system. It was ways for people to transfer culture, information, as much as quote unquote like goods, commodities. And so it was also the sort of thing that like the Mongols used very effectively, and also the guarantee of the Pax Mongolica, or the kind of Mongolian peace, along these roads and other roads within their sort of imperial jurisdiction, was one of their kind of, it was like the carrot they dangled in front of their vassals, like, hey, like nobody gets fucked up on our roads. You can go from the saying in the about the Mongolian Empire was that a virgin girl could carry a stack of gold on her head from one end of the empire to another without being touched, right? Like, which is like very telling about what the fuck people were into at the time, but also
except for the virgin part, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, but because women are property, right? So
right, okay,
and all that bullshit.
I forgot about that.
Right. So unattended chattel. Yeah, right. So,
man, so the Mongols must have had some pampered ass horses if they were always running around on silk. That's crazy.
Right. Yeah. Very lightweight horses. They were actually hollow
very
inside.
Soft hooves.
Wood-fired horses.
The horses had hollow bones and feathers.
Yes. And the Mongols were actually ancient aliens. Yeah.
Now that I haven't heard yet.
Yeah. So, well, you're hearing it from me now. I'm going to publish a book about that and make a lot of money. And
awesome.
We'll see what happens. So the concept, I think that the narrative for Asians in particular is, this was the way things used to be. This was something that worked for us before the big, the white scare of sorts, like the big white empire thing happened and fucked us all up.
Before
and,
opium.
Opium and like all the, the spice trade and the cotton and textiles and all this bullshit. And so that narrative is very like appealing and appeasing when it comes to, whatever we may say PRC is up to in reality with its material projects and its expanding network of obligations, which are not neocolonialism, because again, we've defined that out, right? So
it has like that sort of like modern neoliberal quote unquote globalism has that whole idea of like transfer of culture through economic trade and whatnot. So we can kind of see like the Silk Road being like an earlier example of what they kind of assume that as long as there's trade, there will be cultural trade.
Right, exactly. Like the idea that like you're definitely hitting it on the head there. Like the concepts of cultural transfer as originating through the incentive for trade, right? And so it's a very neoliberal kind of capitalist way of thinking about.
Instead of selling your children into slavery, why don't you simply start a company, start a venture?
Right, exactly. Are you tired of your virgin girls stacked with gold disappearing along the highway? Well, you should start a
limited liability chattel slavery.
Right. Do your mules keep bursting into flames?
And speaking of neoliberalism, we have this quote here from The Diplomat, and they're talking about they're like comparing it to the TPP.
Wait, what is
the Trans-Pacific Partnership, now back from the dead, is more than a trade agreement. While its geopolitical significance and security undertones have been severely affected by the U.S. withdrawal, TPP's project to establish U.S.-style regulatory capitalism as the dominant mode of international economic ordering in the Asia-Pacific lives on. TPP will operate a significant alternative to China's state-centered approach, exemplified in the hugely ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. So they're kind of, I guess they're contrasting it with the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah, and how they are potentially going to. So the TPP was a big deal when I started grad school because it was this thing that like Obama was, like late Obama was trying to push through, and then it was, it's going to happen. It's going to be this huge, neoliberal globalizing agreement, between the West and the East and all this shit.
If you like your Silk Road, you can keep it.
Exactly. And so, and the TPP was also part of like Obama's quote unquote pivot to Asia thing, which was a bit I'm trying to remember. It was really in a lot of ways just kind of a charm thing. But then so the TPP was supposed to go through, and then Trump basically, whatever you want to say about it, Trump pulled out. And then all these other...
for example, his politics are good. I think he's the best president. He's my favorite person. That kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Whatever you want to say, among those things.
Really, whatever you want to say about that. Right. But so Trump pulled out, and then kind of like with the Paris Climate Agreement. Everybody else is like, oh no, the world will end if this doesn't happen. So like we will band together without America and stand strong and be centrists and shit. So the TPP is kind of moving forward. I think TPP 11. I think that's just a revision number. So that's kind of the new
attempt
TPP
number 11
that Japan is heading. 11 is the number of entities, which I assume is just states. But
okay.
Yeah. So basically, TPP would be kind of this, very like overtly neoliberal kind of Western dominated globalization scheme, super popular with all these multinationals and stuff, and then the BRI.
I don't remember what's actually involved in that. It was big during the late Obama years to know about it, but now that all kinds of other crazy shit is happening, I've kind of forgotten about it. So, as I understand, it's basically just like removing capital controls. Is that the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's as I recall, it's got a lot of similarities to like NAFTA and shit, but just kind of in a more like Obama 20 teens kind of way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Trade barriers.
So
good governance,
and
human rights. That's funny. That's hilarious.
Right. Well, I think they actually had a bunch of these, the cosmetics and optics in it too, like where they're like,
it prohibits exploitative child labor and forced labor.
Right. They were actually, I remember
non-exploitative child labor.
Right. I do. Yeah. No, actually, that reminds me. There was a lot of talk when it was still on the table that there were issues that some countries had with labor controls and stuff, and environmental controls and safety regulations and things like that. And so this was kind of seen as, how it is with like the kind of the neolibs and stuff are always like what they really want is money and shit like that. They want to relax controls, etc. But then in like U.S. domestic politics, they want to look nice and they want to play nice in the media and shit. And so to them it was like, oh, this is an easy way to kind of look good because we're gonna use this grand scheme, this grand strategy of opening markets, which we believe is good, and then we're also going to put in labor protections and environmental protections, but then at the same time we will cleverly cede ground and compromise with the most powerful capitalists in the room who really don't want that. So really they didn't even plan to do very much, but it was in there, so it looked good if you could put it in the media,
So I actually found an anime tie-in here.
Okay.
So the TPP has a bunch of stuff about you basically have to obey like U.S. intellectual property laws. That's like basically one of the major provisions. And Ken Akamatsu, creator of the manga series Love Hina and Maho Sensei Negima, expressed concern that the agreement could decimate the derivative doujinshi works prevalent in Japan. Akamatsu argued that the TPP would destroy derivative doujinshi, and as a result, the power of the entire manga industry would also diminish.
Well, I mean, that's a heavy argument. I mean, that I
think that's all you need to know, really.
Yeah. I mean, what am I going to do without my doujinshi,
Right.
Well, I mean, like obviously the further implication is that like fan works in general would be fucked.
Yeah.
If I'm keeping up with what we're talking about correctly.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. All the anything that falls outside of U.S. Intellectual property laws, right, would just be out the window.
Plus, I don't think because I mean, doujinshi obviously is like a generic, just like self-published book thing. So it's usually fan works, it's also like original works, which tend not to be like licensed in any way.
Yeah. He's specifically talking about derivative doujinshi. So like, fan works for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's a ton of like similar problems that other like economies, I guess you could say, would have that are not quite as distinctly Japanese, like the doujinshi thing, but might be similar. Like I think I wouldn't be surprised if things like distribution, like televised distribution and broadcast and stuff, are more relaxed in certain countries where it's harder for them maybe to like pay for rights.
Yeah, I think that's why most I think that's why most telesyncs, like which is a type of movie rip, they mostly come from Russia and I think that's because they're very lax in their
Oh,
copyright
really? Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
I wonder what the Belt and Road Initiative, what kind of implications that might have for things like the transmission of goods from Russia to like Southeast Asia and stuff. Because obviously, like if it's just digital goods, then it's just going through like satellite or fiber optic or something. But if it's goods like pirated goods, physical goods.
Yeah, I don't see if there's any torrent trackers in the Belt and Road Initiative. So I'm looking at the map, and it just has pipelines and railroads and stuff.
Yeah.
It's new pirate
I
bay.
am very curious. Yeah, exactly. I am kind of curious. I was kind of on the same wavelength, I guess, as the Diplomat. True, you asked earlier what the Diplomat is. The Diplomat is kind of like one of these like slick like mainstream magazines where it tracks and reports and explains a bunch of like Asia Pacific political economic affairs for like English speaking audience. It's not strictly for American readers, but there's obviously America's a hegemon, so there's definitely a lot of that shit in there. But
their tagline is "Read the Diplomat, know the Asia Pacific."
Right. Yeah. Know 50% of the entire fucking world.
But yeah, isn't like the graphics for this whole like Belt and Road thing saying it's like 56 or like 4.4 billion people. It's a huge
exactly. It's
economic
huge,
region.
and I think that's one reason why PRC is really interested in creating that, because it's a competitor network. And if we think about like Bickler Nitson and all that capitalist power stuff, like logistics and distribution. And you don't even have to refer to them specifically, but like a lot of any political economist worth their salt will say, logistics and distribution is probably like 80%, of economic power. Manufacturing is great, but like that's just part of the story. And so if you have even just implicit control, like soft power and influence and obligations all around a highly modernized infrastructure system and road network and whatever else is involved in this, then, and in this case, if it basically is able to contact and influence and draw from half of the human population on Earth,
It's actually 62%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the issue with like a lot of the 19th century political theory and stuff like that. Is it's all concerned with production
stuff
modes and possibly points of sale, but like the whole distribution thing's kind of often overlooked.
Exactly.
Which it's like that's kind of what defines our current economic mode, is the distribution, or more so the lack thereof.
Yep.
Right.
And remember what I said.
Yeah, I mean, like in the early 19th century, in the late 18th, manufacturing was pretty important because manufactured goods weren't nearly as common as they are now. So control of former colonies by former colonizers was basically predicated on being the sole source of manufactured goods. And so you would have to sell them raw materials in order to get their currency and then pay for the manufactured goods with that currency. So it used to be sort of true, and now we just control it all through like intellectual property and shit.
Right. Well, like, yeah, because that's like the big thing of the Industrial Revolution was that by standardizing production modes, you can standardize products, and when you standardize products, you can like patent those standardized products and such, and therefore more or less kind of just restrict everything to, rather than competing. What do you call like when it's not machine based production, like an individual who manufacture stuff by hand. There's a word for that, but rather than like each manufacturer competing manufacturer to manufacturer, it's just firms or whatever you would call them competing over ownership of intellectual property and thus production. So
yeah, so now you can just send designs out that you need someone else to manufacture, and then you,
right, like say,
since you have the capital to hire them,
manufacturing company, and
Yep.
say like the PRC or something, and then
oh whoa,
so
no way.
even yeah. Oh, yeah. So, like, even countries not directly involved in the whole Belt and Road thing would probably have, like, a pretty big stake in what goes down there because of that.
Yeah.
I actually,
Yeah,
this is kind of
exactly.
random, but I stumbled on this song. I was listening to Thai pop songs. I had autoplay on, and it went to this this Thai like folk sort of song that was about how Thailand like manufactures all these goods, and like nobody realizes that they're using them, and the goods are like really high quality and everything. But then like people in Thailand will they basically like send the goods to Japan, and then Japan like repackages them and sends them back to Thailand, and people buy them because they're like higher status now because they're Japanese goods. It's pretty interesting.
It's
Anyway,
like what
I
comes
forget what we were
first,
talking about.
Culture or
I
art?
listen to music.
Yeah. Tell us about the songs you listen to that have to do with the Belt and Road Initiative.
Oh,
I'm sure there's a lot.
I don't have anything for this, to be honest. I was going to make a joke, but I got none. Moving on.
In the weather today.
We can't move on. I'm sorry. This is what we're talking about now.
So yeah, what? Shit. Where was I?
Ying Li. That's who her name was. But anyway, this other one is called it's called Made in Thailand. It doesn't have an artist on here. I don't know why. Carabao. Pretty cool song. Would recommend. And also that Ying Li song
Hell yeah.
that slaps.
Well, I mean, obviously, that is actually a pretty important idea. The fact that goods values changes depending on their source, not because of like actual literal quality, but
Right.
just because social expectation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of busts a hole through some theories of value. Not naming any names.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're all European, so we're fine. We'll just European continent.
The lyric is made in Thailand, and when put up in the shops, they put the made in Japan labels upon them. Then they sell well, sell for high prices, and the wearers then brag they've got imported clothes, the latest fashions from the magazines. It wasn't the foreigners who cheated us, but it was us who cheated ourselves.
It's hard.
That's
It's hard to hear.
That's a bop right there.
So,
Well, it sounds cooler in a
I
different
feel like
language.
Obviously, literal translations lose their foot.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And you know, my singing is just great for that part. You know, that's what they sound like in the song when they're singing the words.
You can say the most basic shit and make it sound good if you rhyme
Put it to a
it
tune.
and put a
Right.
flow.
Yeah.
You know, just I'm gonna write all of my economic essays with a triplet flow, and
It's gonna Eminem that shit to death. Yeah. So Ryan, you put some notes down here about the funding and loan schemes that were involved. I was curious to just kind of like talk about that a bit because it's more specific than like my broad science fiction history of the actual physically Silk Road and all of the wood mules and shit. Let's talk about neoliberal finance.
Right. So China has like they actually have like quotas for how much they want to lend out per year, which is kind of weird. Like they want to lend out like a minimum amount every year.
Okay.
I don't know. That just seems strange to me that it wouldn't just be like need based. I guess like, hey, we want to build this and it's going to cost this much, so that's how much we need to lend, as opposed to like, we really want to give out $1 billion this year.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been meeting those goals, by the way. So that's cool. But so this is like kind of a like a nice portrayal of them. It's I got this from chinapower.csis.org. I think that's
Yeah, CSIS. Yeah,
it's a CSIS.
Center for
I think it's a
Strategic.
government thing. Oh, what is it?
Yeah, it's one of the big international, I think, security think tanks, Center for Strategic and International Studies. And so that's the kind of place that a lot of people at my grad school wanted to, like, they aspired to work at a place like this. But CSIS is kind of like a prestigious one. It's a little bit. I want to say it's got some pretty, like, it's mostly center right for the most part. Very pro-market, pro-American, quote-unquote security concerns, but without, like, they might be horrible, but they're not, like, losing their minds all the time, like some of these fucking places like AEI and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, they're what you might call a sober actor in the field, even if they're assholes. So you can kind of,
Right.
if you read their analysis, you're like, okay, it has structure, it has some, like, I get how your worldview would put you there,
So national
often,
authoritarians, basically.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so their assessment is pretty fair to. That's not really a good word, but pretty favorable. That's what I'm trying to think of to Belt and Road Initiative.
Even-handed.
So they say
maybe?
that the interest rates that they offer on the loans are below those offered by commercial banks, and they have extended repayment schedules. And they're negotiated between governments. So, or I don't know if that means. I guess that means they're negotiated individually differently per government. It says government to government, which that's not a good phrase.
Yeah, that would be. That's like bilateral agreements, I'm assuming.
Okay.
So a bit like a financial treaty, essentially.
Yeah. So it says in Indonesia, China Development Bank has offered a 40-year concessionary loan without asking for government debt guarantees to finance 75% of the 5.29 billion Jakarta-Bandung Railway, Indonesia's first high-speed railway, and a model infrastructure project for the Belt and Road effort. The loans have a 10-year grace period. A 60% portion is denominated in U.S. dollars, carrying a 2% interest rate. And the remaining 40% is in Chinese yuan, carrying a 3.4% interest rate, according to Bank of China International. So Indonesia has to get a bunch of foreign currency to pay back these loans, which right there I think is
and that
fairly indicative of neocolonialism. And go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say from the kind of neoliberal, especially like international, like bilateral agreements and bilateral economic agreements and using these other denominations would be explained as a way to manage risk. And so, of course, to the people who are pro capitalism, essentially, they're like, oh yeah, this is very like, even-keeled, good judgment, very, very good, but two things. A, of course, those of us who are skeptical of the international currency system and also just money itself, we recognize the concepts of risk and debt and everything for really what they are, like you said, ways to control people. But it's still important to understand in the international setting that the other side of this, it comes from the post-World War II essentially global political economic engineering effort that led to things like the World Bank and the IMF existing, as much as it did lead to things like NATO and the UN, because some of the subtext of this is that U.S. dollars are not risky. Why? Because of U.S. power, right? And so right. So it's like when people just kind of like read that and just don't investigate it, it just flies right by them. But what is interesting is that the Chinese yuan is not really, like, this is something I wrote an essay or two on the Chinese yuan is like not really as major a player as you would expect. The RMB, the renminbi, is it's it is a major currency, right?
Because yuan is the name of is like what people call the currency, but renminbi is like the official term for the currency system.
The currency, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so the RMB, as I'm going to call it because it's easier, is to the USD like it's like a David and Goliath, but with no sling and no stone, like or very little to go on. Chinese currency is just not that powerful right now. China is powerful, but on the world currency market, the RMB is not that powerful. And so when you get these like like red-faced American financial TV fuckers talking about like Chinese currency, Chinese industry is taking over. Like they don't know what the fuck they are talking about. Like, yes, there's a lot of trade with China. Yes, there's a lot of labor in China. Yes, they can do certain things cheaply and they choose to. Blah fucking blah. But when it comes to their currency power, it is extremely limited. I don't know. It might actually be behind the pound sterling in terms of like the amount that's in circulation in the world, which is like there's something to that because Britain is fucking tiny,
right?
Right. So like and honestly, and what's important to realize is that
China is it big or small compared to the UK?
China's I would say a moderate sized juggernaut. And so the other thing too is to recognize that China's a new player, whereas the UK has its thumb on the scale. Like it was part of that whole financial engineering, economic engineering project that I mentioned just now, because they were one of the winners of World War II and so forth and so on, and they were a traditional imperial European power. So it's kind of funny that like they're not even that powerful anymore, but they just had like a better seat at the table automatically. Anyway, so it's interesting because I think that China does have designs on like regional hegemony, which it already has in large part within East Asia. But the Belt and Road Initiative, just to kind of tip my hand, seems like their attempt to use what is considered acceptable, which is soft power, in order to gain greater and greater shares of world, like what you might call share of mind, or cultural power and influence, to I don't know, do what states do, right? Like individually, who knows what the fuck people are thinking, but as a state, what they want is to perpetuate themselves to the expense of others, and so forth.
Right.
So,
and it seems like having these loans denominated in yuan would increase the power of the renminbi because it increases the need for it worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yoking the yuan or the RMB to the US dollar in a deal like this with a third party that is friendly to both of them at this point in history, and has traditionally been friendly to both of them at different times for different reasons. And it's an emerging economy. Indonesia is an emerging economy in the kind of capitalist parlance, neoliberal parlance. Then it's basically a really great way for them to like you said, try to kind of increase the power of the currency if they can, and kind of sort of just experiment and see where things go with the financial side of this deal.
So here's an interesting random fact about renminbi. In 1889, the yuan was equated at par with the Mexican peso.
Damn. And now,
so like basically, soft power is viewed as okay because we have this sort of like the neoliberal ideas that as long as it's not like a war, it's a good influence. Because like the idea that international relations are economic inherently now or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're actually living at the time with the least violence ever in history. I don't know if you guys knew that. But
oh yeah,
it's true.
I've heard that. I've heard that a lot. I've heard it so much that I just keep saying it out loud to other people.
Yeah, and also Africans have a lower IQ, but that's just
I've heard that
nature.
as well. Very
I mean,
frequently.
that's just science.
Right.
It's like because like basically, I guess to put it in context, the whole neoliberal era is just like the post quote unquote Cold War era of like we moved from direct wars to proxy wars to economic wars.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And this is viewed as good because I guess as long as we're not killing millions of people with bullets, then it's fine to do it with money or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, weren't proxy wars pretty popular like prior to the 20th century too? Like there like weren't a lot of colonial wars proxy wars basically? Or were
more
they
or less
more
by
direct?
default, yeah. Yeah. I mean, like a lot of colonial wars were like a lot of the imperial anxiety around colonies, and like seizing colonies before other imperialists could get it, and battling over these slivers of land and all this shit. This was all so this is a big part of IR's history, international relations history. Is that there's this whole idea of like great power politics, which emerged in like the 18th and 19th century, and then influenced a lot of this 20th century thinking. And the Cold War was kind of the like a huge paradigmatic example of that. But a lot of it also developed from things like the Napoleonic era, the era of like Prussian domination and things like that.
Yeah, well, because like pre-20th century war was really bad at logistics, so I guess they couldn't really see what because the way we do war now, with like say Iran or whatnot, the whole idea isn't really so much of like controlling that specific country through like killing off enough of their people that they just cede power to you, but more so to put like the logistical weight onto their allies and such.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, from what I understand, like all war today is like all about logistics. Like the U.S. is the powerful military because we have the largest system of logistics under our control.
Yes, and true, you're right as well. It always has been about logistics at some level. Yeah, it's just that we're better and better at it now.
We were just so bad at it that we kind of had to just fix any logistical issue with sheer numbers and force. And
right, exactly. And I think also symbolic victories, like still important, but much more important in the old days, because of the blow to morale and like the limitation of people's ability to communicate and like escape their local circumstances and stuff. So it's like if you saw St. Petersburg fall or something, like that's a huge fucking mindfuck, right? Whereas now it's like, you could fucking obliterate a city with a nuclear device. Not that that's ever been done, but hypothetically, and whatever country that hosted that city would march on or do something else, But yeah.
Well, it's kind of like my whole thing of like, everyone always fear mongering about World War III or whatever, but like, it's just like it's just not going to happen because that sort of idea of just a massive balls to the wall logistical fight isn't really sensible in the modern paradigm. And not to mention, if it was going to happen, that we've had so many incidences in the past half century that would have caused it that clearly it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and one thing too,
the real World War III was the proxy wars we made along the way.
Yep. One thing that I think is also important to note is that one of the possibilities that you could to build on your point, True. Yeah, World War III is not going to happen like World War II, unless a real numbskull like John Bolton really actually just gets a room full of buttons, But those people like that will probably not actually pop off even like a World War III scenario as people imagine it. It will probably turn into like the great American nuclear crisis of 2021 or some shit, and then a bunch of other actors will get in and kind of hold the whole thing down. because nobody wants to lose the commodities, and they don't want to lose the distributed networks, and they don't want to lose all this other, to use the term technomass.
I need my tendies.
All right. Well, because just the way we like through media and whatnot treat international incidents is very filtered to like meet a specific end. Like any, a minor riot in one country might be overblown into basically a coup internationally, but even a nuclear incident could very easily just be, it would be nearly impossible to completely cover it up, but they would do it enough to make it seem like it wasn't a big enough deal, just to rationalize like, oh yeah, we'll sanction them, but we're not going to cut off all international relations over this.
Right.
Which a war would imply we have to cut them off.
Mm-hmm. It follows some of the logic of it's like if you're able to do it, it's better, it's more effective to wound an enemy soldier in an army than to kill them outright. Unless of course they've got the kill shot on you or something, but it's better to wound them so that they have to be taken care of. And so it's actually much better to sabotage. Oh, interesting how that theme keeps coming up. But it's much better to sabotage and to hamstring the leadership or the public trust in the government or foreign business or whatever, so that you can create a kind of compromise and force a decision for them to do one thing or another in your favor. And so the more that you can control their decisions, this is another thing that's this is both military logic and economic logic. If you can force someone else's decisions and defer your own costs, then you basically own them.
Right. Well, yeah, because that's kind of the whole loopholes of the laws of war and whatnot, is that it's actually in a lot of cases extremely strategic just to have a unit surrender, because then they have to be taken prisoner rather than killed, and there's a necessary logistic weight to that. So things say bringing back the Silk Road puts a lot of weight on all that sort of stuff, because you can keep, say, smaller countries from opposing you militarily at any point, because now they have that they're on the road. So if they piss you off, you can just toll them out of it.
Well, what about this? What about that? Yeah. And it's also interesting because it reminds me suddenly of when Amazon said that they wanted to build a couple of new HQs, right? And so they're like, oh, we're going to turn it into a big old game, and everybody's going to tell us where, why they're the best candidate to host the new HQ or the new HQs. And so all these fucking cities went nuts trying to get those quote unquote jobs, but really just to get the fucking pork. And then Amazon.
I love pork.
Well, I actually pretty much predicted that they would just go with DC and New York, because that's where the power is in terms of all this, and that's just where you would go. And then that's what they declared. But on the way, they got all this intel on all these cities and all this other shit that would otherwise have it would have imposed a cost on Amazon to do the work of getting that intel. So even if the intel was open source, even if it was readily available, it would not have been as easy, right? And I'm pretty sure those cities volunteered even more information than Amazon would have necessarily been willing to pay workers to get.
Invest into the gathering.
Yeah, like Arlington drawing up a map of where all the senators they would have to influence are.
Right.
Or whatever.
Exactly. So I think that the Belt and Road Initiative, and probably the TPP, and probably a lot of other multilaterals like this, are an effort of the hegemon or something proximate to the hegemon to get this kind of information advantage, getting willing participants to essentially surrender their A, signify that they're willing to do it, B, surrender valuable information, and C, put themselves in an open compromise situation where if they pull out, they look like shit, right? So,
for the most part, it's greasing the gears of logistics and whatnot, but it also has that sort of that inherently capitalist idea of, in order to be in on anything, you have to earn it, even though clearly the countries that are going to be involved are already beneficial to begin with, so But it's the same with the whole idea of like the quote unquote first world and whatnot. It's the meeting these arbitrary standards just because we set them forth, and you have to put effort into meeting that specific goal rather than just improving your country outright.
Yeah,
so
it is.
It's important for like questioning any sort of positive side effects that they state that this is going to have.
Yeah, definitely. And
So
I think that
speaking of
your
pork-
remark there was. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Yeah, speaking of pork, there is a lot of corruption that supposedly, like according to like Xi himself, they're trying to prevent, any sort of corruption. I guess because they really want this to succeed, so they're trying to make it look squeaky clean or whatever. But I have this passage here
covering up corruption. No, I would never.
That would be a brand new thing that has never happened. That's true. So in Bangladesh, officials said in January that China Harbor would be banned from future contracts over accusations that the company attempted to bribe an official at the Ministry of Roads, stuffing $100,000 into a box of tea, government officials said in interviews.
Well,
I would like that box of tea.
yeah, right.
But then, like, going back to Sri Lanka, like, there was quite a lot of corruption there, but I think China can kind of play it off because it's mostly that Sri Lanka has a really fucked up government. From what I remember reading about this, like, their president was President Rajapaksa until 2015, and if I remember correctly, like he basically structured the government so that he and his two brothers like controlled everything essentially. But yeah, so he like got that contract because he was basically in charge of all decisions on his own.
Well, I can't say I'm surprised.
I mean, I think that's a lot. It's kind of similar to how history nerds are always. I love talking about this. They're always really into this whole idea of like silly wars, like wars started over some petty thing or whatnot. And like they're kind of missing the point of that, like those stories and whatnot. It's governments are going to do what they're going to do. States have their reasons for things. They're often very abstract and built on like entire histories of like built up tensions and shit. But the moment you find like a valid excuse or whatnot, kind of like as I mentioned in the group chat, like Tonkin, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, or like the Spanish-American War, or as we're doing with Iran, it's just we want the consequences of the war, but we don't have a justification. And it's kind of like same with corruption and whatnot. It's just like we want to cut these people out, but we have yet to find an excuse. So you'll look for any petty little thing and just like cut them off the moment you find it.
I forgot about this part. So they actually tried to get President Rajapaksa reelected. They donated $7.6 million to his reelection campaign.
Interesting. Rich getting richer. What's funny is Rajapaksa in Malay, and I wouldn't be surprised if it means the same thing in Bangladeshi or whatever. But Rajapaksa in Malay just means like forceful king. So he's basically like, I'm president dictator.
Let's see. I'm trying to find if I have anything else. Port of the capital. Sorry. Oh yeah. So about that port that they built. So it was built by China Harbor Engineering Company, which is one of Beijing's largest state-owned enterprises. That's another thing that people talk about a lot when they say that it's neocolonialism, is that most of the contracts are awarded to Chinese companies. And so they're bringing in a bunch of Chinese workers to build the infrastructure. But anyway, this port is the Hambantota Port Development Project, and In 2012, the port drew only 34 ships.
Wow.
Just 34.
That's,
They actually have another port like right on the other side of the country, which like it's a small country. And the other port is like hugely busy and is like a really important shipping hub. But yeah, this other one not so much. It only drew 34 ships.
Then that's the one that the Chinese invested in. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it says here, this is a different figure than the other one that I had, but it says after negotiations for repayment on the debt, the government handed over the port and 15,000 acres of land around it for 99 years. Which 99 years is that classic?
Have you heard of Hong Kong?
Huh?
I said, have you heard of Hong Kong? It's one of those century-long leases or whatever that like the British forced on China.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's like the classic like unequal treaty length.
Okay, yeah.
The whole thing is that states just do that because they can do things on
like
what's generally considered a long-term thing.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's longer than a human lifespan, it's bigger than you, is the point.
Yep. And that makes sense. From a state point of view, yeah. So they got it for 99 years.
Yep, 99 years.
Shit.
I'm not seeing a lot of other interesting stuff. I see this comment from you. It says something about Poe as introduced by Seriously Wrong. Can you explain that?
Yeah.
I haven't even caught that one yet.
Oh, yeah. So this is just an interesting word that I forget which of them brought up in one of the last episodes. It's like a logical or conceptual word, Poe, P-O, and you just put it between two concepts as like a way to prompt like people to just discuss whatever comes to mind when they put those two ideas together in their head. So this is actually kind of just coming up with the theme of the whole episode really is like China's Belt and Road Initiative, Poe, American military bases, and global corporate colonialism. We've kind of been doing that the whole time. But I am actually interested in kind of thinking about how the BRI, it's right now it's explicitly economic, it's trade agreements, it's and so the easy thing to compare it to is neoliberal, global colonialism, neocolonialism, etc. But let's kind of think about my example of like the Mongols and their savvy use of the parts of the Silk Road network that they could access and control, and how they created a kind of like imperial order around it, around the part that they had. And that's kind of, that was really like a pre-steam way that you could extend both hard and soft power at a great distance, was to control an economic network. Because again, like the carrot is that everything's great and you have an economic network, and you just let the Mongols be the Mongols. And then the stick is that they're on horses and they have these nice roads, and as many cities in, I think especially the Middle East and Central Asia learned, if you fuck with the Mongols, they will fucking like obliterate you, right? And so I think at least one city made a treaty with them, like, oh yeah, we'll submit. And then like once the Mongols left, they're like, haha, we tricked you. You guys just like left and we'll just go back to being us. And the Mongols came back and leveled the entire city and killed every last living thing within it. Not that America would ever do that, and not that China would ever do that, but like controlling, essentially asserting economic control over a vast network like this is implicitly asserting the potential for military domination, right?
Yeah, I mean the major development in the last like 200 years is like layers and layers of bureaucracy on top of state power to like
exactly
add threat levels without using direct force, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so it's that's just one possibility. Like to me, I don't know that is something that they're necessarily going to do, but I know that they want to be able to do it because they are a state and because they are engaging in a project of this scale, right?
Yeah.
So the war might be silly, to put it in True's kind of framing. Whatever war might happen might be silly, but it's fucking war, and there are intended consequences. Yeah.
What is it good for?
Right. Silk.
That is one thing it's good for, I guess.
Yeah.
I think those guys were not quite correct on that one.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that it's like it's underway, and there's just like, there's just a lot of possibility right now, and so it's a lot of fun to think about, talk about, but we just don't know at all what's going to happen next with this big project.
Yeah, I mean we could get into more details, but it seems like we have a consensus that it does seem pretty neo-colonial. I mean, like the loans function essentially the same way that the World Bank's loans do. We already have an example of them using the fact of of Sri Lanka not being able to repay their loan to force them to give them sovereignty over their land, which is like a pretty clear-cut example of neocolonialism, I think. Yeah. So I don't know how necessary it is to get into many more details because I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, and I think that like listeners, we have this sprawling document full of notes and links, and so if you're like interested in like the nitty gritty of this whole thing, which again may change at any moment for various reasons. Who knows what's going to happen with the Belt and Road Initiative? Who knows what's going to happen with, for example, the TPP in the near future and in the far distant future. So feel free to read up on it if it's something that you're interested in. Just like read up on it, and especially like learn some of the kind of the framing and the terminology that goes with not just like the financial and banking side of it, but also some of the stuff we talked about with like soft and hard power, and some of the history of the Silk Road Network as well. Yeah.
All right. I guess that's all we have.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot anime related to talk about. I've been watching Hunter x Hunter, which is it's an entertaining series.
I
but
started Evangelion the other day. I'm still here, by the way.
Oh, you're here.
You started what now?
I haven't been talking because I can't understand Ryan 90% of the time.
Well, that's normal.
Oh no.
Just kind of sound underwater to me.
Well, that's because I'm underwater.
We're in the Maritime Silk Road at this time. So.
Yeah, I told you I was in Cape Cod. What, did you think I was on the land?
But I got the important
That also
stuff.
sounds like a euphemism.
That if you don't think the Belt and Road Initiative is neocolonialism, it's purely for silly ideological reasons.
Yeah.
You're a teenage Marxist on Twitter.
There is absolutely.
I love
no
Dang.
reason to
Cape and Cod Initiative.
Cape Cod is clearly the name of a male escort club.
Yes.
Like a vampire themed one or something. And so what were you watching, Chloe?
Oh, I started Evangelion the other day.
Oh, okay. Everyone seems to be watching Evangelion all of a sudden.
Just because it's on Netflix.
Because it
now.
got added to Netflix.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's normie.
Oh, that's right. I
I've
did
been
link that tweet
watching
about
the,
it being on Netflix. Yeah.
Second season of Kakaguri.
Okay, two of you were talking at once.
I'm clearly more important.
Well, yeah, because I could understand you.
I watched Agretzko the other day. That's
Yeah, I watched-
that's a pretty good.
I watched Agretzko.
Good.
Is that a comedy?
It is.
Yeah.
It
It's
looks
a very deep
It's a
philosophical work.
workplace comedy.
It's a
about
very deep
venting
philosophical
stress.
work about hating work.
Yeah.
And just the sort of, I don't know, it's got that same sort of thing when, like, that you get at work in general, where people say things complaining about work that can clearly spin off into very radical statements, but they just kind of leave it
Right.
at that.
Yep.
Makes sense. And yeah, Hunter x Hunter is decent entertainment, but not a lot of themes that I can get out of it, other than like I guess generally you should humanize everyone. That's maybe the one thing that I could pull from it.
That sounds nice.
Yeah,
I've never seen any of it.
I think it's on Netflix, which makes it normie shit.
Normie shit.
I'm watching it on
I propose
Hulu.
we on Hulu.
Makes it
Suppose we
normie
stop
shit.
calling
Rebel.
everything normie shit.
Hulu has a ton of anime, dude. Like it has a lot. You can get simulcasts of stuff,
Yeah.
and you don't have to sit through
Hulu does
commercials
have a ton of anime.
like on Crunchyroll.
Wait, can I get? Fuck, I think I can get Hulu for free again.
Amazon has a pretty large selection of anime, not gonna lie.
I'm enrolled.
They
in,
don't
Really?
have the second season of Gate.
I'm enrolled in school again, so I can get Spotify Student.
My favorite anime on Amazon is Recreators. That one's actually pretty good, philosophically speaking.
I have not heard of that one.
It's got a sort of similar philosophy to what was it? I had a more classic one to compare it to. I forget what it was though.
Recreators.
And it's got clearly it's more related to Oscar Wilde than anything. It's about that just the general idea that like you're expressing more through art than what's directly stated, kind of thing. It's like the exact opposite of Death of the Author in a way. Well, actually, if anything, like the entire plot's kind of like a fight between over Death of the Author, if you think about it. But yeah, it's good. It's just watch it.
Oh no, when are we gonna do an episode on Hogfather?
What the fuck is Hogfather?
What is that?
Help us understand, Chloe.
Please just say words that make sense.
It's a book, but it's a TV special. More importantly,
Because that also sounds like an escort thing.
Clearly.
Oh God. It's right next to Cape Cod Boys Club or whatever.
Mafia themed
The
male
whole
escorts.
district of punny names for escort places.
Now I can't imagine that there's already a place somewhere called Cape Hog, but
I'd imagine that'd just be like some like fuck, what do you call it? Just like places that just serve various pork cuts. So like
Right.
in Cape Cod.
Exactly.
So let's be real, it's like 2019. It would just be a bacon.
Right.
I was with you up until you said bacon.
Cape Hog would probably be a place where they would serve various cuts of pork and whatever, but then it was like, but let's be real, it's 2019, it would probably just all be bacon. And then I was going to say, if it's called Cape Hog, it should be a place that serves seafood, chowder and crab and shit with bacon on it. But I'm sure all of our vegan listeners are puking in their mouths right now.
It's
very
one of
much
those places that like the
I'm so sorry.
locals call like high art, kind of like high good cuisine, but like people like tourists will visit it, and it's just like salmon with bacon on top.
Mhm. But what if?
By the way, I
it's
actually went to
bacon?
a clam chowder festival here.
Oh yeah. Did you chow?
Pretty good. First time I've ever tried clam chowder, actually. So
That's a pretty stunning review there.
Yeah. it was good. That's my 10 out of 10.
user found
That's how
this
I always
review
review things on the show. It's good.
We should just going to transition to talking about the good podcast instead.
Do you
we
guys
lost Chris.
even have like an outro? I've never listened that far into an episode.
Thanks, man.
I don't know. They can cut this. They
Yeah,
can
our
cut
outro is we say okay, bye. Pretty much.
Yeah, it always feels like you're hanging up on the phone.
Okay,
Yep.
bye. Okay, love you. Bye.
Yeah.
I don't love you.
That's what we'll start doing. We'll just say
I just feel like
we'll
I
say
should
we love you.
back.
Bye.
Chris, you've lived in the Midwest
Yeah.
for parts of your life. I'm sure you know how that's not how it is.
Which part? The hanging up and saying.
Yeah, hanging up, just being okay, goodbye.
Oh yeah, no, it takes forever.
Okay.
It's just like,
All right.
wait, I forgot to tell you all of the
right.
important things I initially called you about.
Right.
So how was life?
Right. Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah. Okay, bye. Well, actually,
Did you read that?
oh,
Did you read that collection of Camu essays I sent you the other day? Can we discuss the philosophical implications?
And this is pretty much what we're doing right
this is
now.
like, everyone lives 2 hours away from each other at like breakneck speeds, so they might as well just stay on the phone.
Okay, but like Hogfather, it's a Christmas movie.
I don't believe you.
It's really good.
I don't have to believe you.
because it's already June. We should start planning the episode for December. We might actually get it done by then. Great. It's the best Christmas movie. Better than Elf.
Nice.
We totally plan ahead on our.
I believe you.
Our last episode was 6 months of planning. That's all we did for that 6 months.
5 months and
Jesus.
6 days.
Shit, it's like
So I bet it went
as long as
perfectly.
my last job just lasted. Yeah.
That's it's longer than I've been at my job. So
Yeah.
What's a job?
yeah.
It's a thing that nerds want to make you do.
A job is what a hogfather does.
It's a lie.
I think he does specific kinds of jobs. Well, it sounds like we're all crashing, so I think that's about as good a time as any to end it.
Yeah.
So if you like this episode, that's weird, but check out our other ones at neighborsciencepodcast.com. Our Twitter is at neighborscipod. I'm at Handle of Rye. Chris is at solidarity_goth. True is at Trewbot. Chloe is at shitpost scarcity with no I. Because she has no I.
If you loved all my deep insights during this episode.
And speaking of not having an I, one thing that I would advise all our listeners to do is to go on Dan Crenshaw's Twitter and just reply to everything that he writes with like pirate stuff, like "our matey" and "that's a lot of booty" and that kind of thing.
Wait, whose Twitter?
Dan Crenshaw.
Oh,
Oh, Dan Crenshaw. Yeah.
I've determined that doing that is mildly problematic, but really funny.
Yes.
So it's impossible to tell if it's bad or not.
Yeah, I'm not gonna cancel you for it, but I'm not gonna shed a tear for you when you get canceled for it.
Oh, I just realized that noise in the background was my cat asking to be let out.
Well, that's a perfect time to end
What
it.
did you want?
All right, we love you. Bye.
All right, bye. All right.
I think
I do actually have to go, so.
There's some literal door closing sound effects for your outro.
Perfect.
I think I
All
was.
right,
the best
I do
one
have to go, so I'm going to hang up now. Love you.
as usual.
Epic ending. We should go watch